Okay, good morning, everyone. So I'm Sierra Phillips. I'm the local recovery coordinator at the Toma VA Medical Center. And our facility is fortunate to be part of the Monroe County Mental Health Coalition. And in honor of Mental Health Month, we are providing this lunch and learn opportunity. And I'll be talking about WRAP, which stands for Wellness Recovery Action Plan, and how we can use that framework to support recovery, specifically focusing on some of the challenges that we've been facing for the last 12 or 16 months related to COVID. There's a chat, so you should be able to ask questions if you have any, and we'll have time for that at the end. So I first want to give just a brief history of WRAP, which stands for Wellness Recovery and Action Plan. And it's a framework that was developed by individuals who have lived experience. They were living with mental health challenges. And Mary Ellen Copeland specifically, who is the founder of the Copeland Center, and began thinking about how could she approach her wellness from a different perspective. How could she really empower herself to take ownership of her wellness and her recovery journey, and really look at a holistic way of engaging in her own recovery? And so she started asking questions about what were some of the things that really worked for her, and maybe some things that she hadn't had success with. And several dozen people with lived experience came together in the late 90s and started having this conversation similar to what Mary Ellen Copeland was already kind of thinking about for herself in terms of her wellness and recovery. And she sent out a survey to individuals who identified as having a lived experience of mental health recovery. And their responses came back with 5 key concepts, which I'll go over in just a second. And so she gets together with a colleague, Jane Winterling, and they developed this formal framework based on these 5 key concepts and presented it to this group of several dozen people who are also asking the same questions of how can we do our recovery better? How can we engage better? What are some tools that really equip us to be well and show up in the way that we want to show up in the world? And really is a tool that Mary Ellen used herself for her own wellness, and that was the basis of WRAP. So this group of individuals started mentoring others who wanted to engage in this process. They facilitated workshops and came up with a very specific framework on how this model can be used to help others engage in their wellness. They established this non-negotiable set of values and ethics, a list of practices that actually formed an evidence-based practice that has been recognized by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, and then founded the Copeland Center that for a long time, actually over 20 years, has been distributing all kinds of books and workbooks and facilitating workshops and training folks to be facilitators of this process called WRAP, and have really reached millions of people through those books and workshops and trainings. And it's now used both formally and informally, formally as an evidence-based practice, and then informally one-on-one in programs throughout the world, really. As I said, it's recognized as an evidence-based practice by SAMHSA, and that's when the model is used as it was designed by Mary Ellen Copeland. So that's co-facilitation of WRAP groups with 2 certified trained co-facilitators who have been through this specific process and are qualified to effectively facilitate this process. And they have an advanced level certification that equips folks to train other individuals to be group facilitators. So there's several levels of training that are available for folks, and it's firmly grounded in the values and ethics of WRAP, which we'll go over in just a second, and very strongly based on the foundation of these 5 key concepts. And the idea is that anyone, no matter their background, their education level, what position they hold, any other set of demographics or descriptors, they have the right to predict their own future and the course of their life, right? We own responsibility for our process and our progress, and Everyone who enters into the RAP process leaves all of those other titles and descriptors at the door. When I enter into a RAP group as a RAP facilitator, I'm not a clinician, I'm not a professional, I'm a RAP facilitator facilitating this group process, and everyone enters into this process in a RAP group as equals. RAP is very firmly grounded in the idea that people do get well. No matter their set of circumstances, they can recover, they can achieve wellness, they can stay well for long periods of time, and they can do the things that they want to do in their life. They can set goals and they can achieve those goals if they have access to the right support system, the right resources, the right education, the right tools. So REP firmly promotes this idea of self-determination. I get to determine where I want to go in my life and how I want to get there, and I get to determine what I want to include in terms of resources and tools and people I want to involve in that process in the way of supporters. People in this model of RAP are looked at as equals, treated with dignity and compassion and mutual respect, right? Again, all of those descriptors or labels or diagnostic labels or diagnoses that may have been attributed to an individual, that doesn't matter with respect to entering into the RAP process, right? Everyone is equal when they enter that space, whether it's one-on-one with a RAP facilitator or entering into a RAP group. And again, it's based on the idea that really recovery is limitless. It's really based on individual goals and aspirations and progress. If folks want to enter into this work and do the work, then they get to determine how far they'll go. That being said, RAP is completely voluntary. So it's not a form of treatment that can be mandated or that someone can be recommended or encouraged to enter into this process, but really throughout the process, how much they engage, how they show up, the space that they create for themselves when they show up in this process, if they want to continue at any point, how much they want to do in terms of developing their own wellness recovery action plan, how long that process takes for them, what elements they do or don't include in their plan as they go through that process, if they want help or they want to do it on their own, who they choose to support them both in making their wellness recovery action plan, but also as folks who might be a supporter listed in their plan and in their recovery process. All of that is completely individualized. Very empowering in terms of what folks want to create for themselves in their own recovery. And very firmly based in the idea that myself creating my RAP, I'm the subject matter expert on myself and on my lived experience, right? So there are resources and tools that might be brought into the mix in terms of things I can choose from to put into my wellness recovery action plan, but I'm the expert on myself and what works for me or maybe what hasn't worked for me. And we focus very much on strengths. RAP is a very strengths-based process, and kind of shy away from perceived deficits, whether that's diagnostically or limits that I might impose on myself, and really focus on what I bring to the table in terms of resources and tools. So RAP avoids the use of clinical and medical and diagnostic language. We don't say there's not a space for that, because absolutely there is, and we'll talk about some of the places where those things can be incorporated, but really want it to be in my own words, words that I think fit me when I'm describing my lived experience, my recovery journey, my wellness plan, however I want to use that. Working together in the group process, again, the evidence-based process is this is two co-facilitators who are trained facilitating this process with 6 to 8 people. It could be more or less, but really a group of peers who are coming together and sharing ideas and tools and tricks and resources to increase mutual understanding and really to promote wellness. And emphasis is on things that are simple and safe and easy, accessible, free. The idea is to have the tools that are in my toolbox be things I can have access to wherever I am, and not be things that are cost prohibitive or have other barriers in the way, and shying away from things that maybe have potential negative or devastating side effects. It really has a very trauma-informed approach. So from that perspective, understanding that difficult feelings and behaviors are a natural response, normal responses to traumatic life experiences and circumstances, and those things happening in your life may not necessarily be a symptom or a diagnosis. They could be natural responses to trauma or the circumstances that are happening in your life, and really approaching it from that perspective lessens stigma and shame and self-blame, and really engages folks in the process of exploring their own wellness and recovery. So I mentioned the 5 key concepts that WRAP is built on, really the foundation of building this wellness recovery action plan. So the first foundational concept is hope. And that really being kind of, if there's not hope that people do recover, that they can achieve wellness and remain well for long periods of time, that doesn't mean there won't be setbacks or relapses, but that really that concept that recovery is not a linear process, and that hope is there, that people can achieve the level of wellness that they want, their optimal level of functioning. The second foundational concept is personal responsibility, really being that recovery is hard work. So I have hope that I can achieve wellness, but I need to be able to put the work in. I'm responsible for my own journey, and I really need to take ownership and engage in this process. No one can do the work for me. They can come alongside me and support me, but they can't do it for me. And really taking that next step, then if I'm responsible for my own wellness, then I also need to empower myself and educate myself about what's going on with myself, with my body, what's happening in my environment, and how that might have contributed to where I'm at. So I'm taking a look at life experiences, whether that's adverse childhood experiences or other trauma or other events that may have impacted who I am and how I react to things. As well as looking at all of the options that might be available to me to enhance my wellness. So really taking time to understand that there's a lot of information out there, and figuring out what does and doesn't work for me. And that's part of me taking responsibility for my wellness, and using then that information to ask for what I need in terms of self-advocacy, to really direct my wellness, to set my own goals for who I want to be and how I want to show up in the world, and find my voice. WRAP groups are really amazing in terms of folks sharing and exchanging ideas, and really feeling empowered to speak up for themselves, and really ask for things that they need, and say when something's not working, or ask questions when maybe they don't completely understand what's going on. And then asking for support, realizing that this is a journey that doesn't have to be taken alone or done in isolation. So really surrounding myself with things that work for me, not just people, right? Often when we hear the term support, that comes up in relationships, and that's absolutely central and key to WRAP, but also understanding there are other ways that I can support myself, and what that might look like, and kind of exploring those things. So WRAP is set up in essentially 6 sections. So the first section is a wellness toolbox. And the idea is that this is a list of things or resources or strategies that I have at my disposal. And it's ever changing as I learn new things, and I can add things to my toolbox or take things out if they're no longer effective. But they're strategies that I've used in the past, or I'm currently using, that keep me in a space of balance and wellness. So I start by asking myself a question of, what do I look like when I show up well in the world? What's my best version of myself? And what are the things I'm doing that create that space I can show up in? What are the things that make me feel better and handle life? And core to that is what WRAP calls a daily maintenance plan. So it's really 2-section. It's a list of things that I need to do every day that keep me showing up in that best space to maintain my wellness. And so we advocate that that list be relatively short. We don't want a long laundry list of things to do that set myself up to not achieve all of those in a single day, right? So really, what are the things I have to do every day that keep myself showing up well? So for some folks, that might be things like hygiene, taking a shower every single day. For folks, it might be nutrition, right? Eating balanced meals. For other folks, it might be exercise. That exercise is something that could show up on the things I need to do every day list, or it could also be on the second list of supplemental things I might want to do that help me feel well, but don't necessarily have to do every single day. So I'm asking myself as I'm forming these lists, what are the things that really go into maintaining my wellness? And what are the things that must happen every day for me to show up in my best space? Sleep. Is there a certain amount of sleep that I need to get in order to really feel like I'm ready to greet the day? I say for me, one of my wellness tools is coffee. I start my day off best when I have that, but adversely. If I have too much, I can definitely tell that maybe there's something that's out of balance. So really recognizing those things that help you show up as your best version of yourself. And then recognizing that life is going to happen. So that next section is stressors. And really that's just life happening every day, unexpected things, and just being aware that there are both internal and external circumstances, events that can happen that make me feel out of balance or uncomfortable. And responses can show up in a lot of different ways, irritability or anxiety, mood swings, or normal reactions to just day-to-day things that are happening, or sometimes traumatic events that might happen that are unexpected. And if we don't respond to them or deal with them, then likely there might be a ripple effect. There are reactions that could get worse or continue to pull me out of balance, further out of balance, away from that space of wellness that I want to show up in. So what do I do with that? Well, RAP is set up kind of in a balance. Each of these sections, starting with stressors and the next 3 sections that we're going to talk about, has an action plan. That's the AP part of RAP, right? Wellness Recovery Action Plan. I'm going to pull from my wellness toolbox and my list of resources and my list of supporters to help create an action plan for each of the things that might come up. So as we help folks brainstorm what might be happening in day-to-day life that could be triggering or stressors, then we also brainstorm what's the other side of that, that we can bring a tool that can help cope with those things that come up, so that proactively we've done this ahead of time and we don't have to think in the moment when we might be reactionary about what we have at our disposal to help. So really brainstorming with someone what they might have in their toolbox, or if they don't feel like they have it, that's an opportunity to build and learn some new skills and tools that folks might be able to then use to combat those things that are happening in everyday life. The next section of RAP is early warning signs. So we talk about this in terms of, this is kind of like a yellow light, or maybe a check engine light if you're talking about your car, right? It's not necessarily an indication that your engine is going to die, right? But it's a warning that says, pay attention, something's happening. You need to investigate further, right? So that's an early warning sign. It's something that's going to show up. It could be internal, it might be external. That is a reaction that's happening to stressful situations. So maybe something that happened in day-to-day life, one of those stressors or triggers didn't get fully balanced out, or something hits a little bit harder. And even when doing your daily maintenance or the things that normally help to de-stress or keep you in a space of wellness, it's just not enough. You're still not feeling well or balanced. So there might be subtle signs that folks notice that additional action might need to be taken. So that can show up in a lot of different ways. So we brainstorm what that might look like. What might someone's early warning signs be? Could be trouble sleeping, could be irritability that doesn't easily resolve, could be hitting the snooze button because you don't want to get out of bed, or isolating, kind of withdrawing from relationships, screening phone calls. Lots of different things could go into this section. And again, RAP is very personalized. It's very subjective to the person's lived experience. So what might be one person's stressor, life is happening, might be another person's early warning sign. And what might be some person's early warning sign could be a little more serious for someone else. It might be indicating this next phase that things are starting to break down. This usually is when things are getting worse and it starts to be noticeable to folks outside. You may be able to keep things internal within the early warning signs, but usually something is starting to happen that this is more serious. This is really that caution light. We need to stop here and take action, find balance, get some additional support maybe, figure out what's going on, because the next step, if we're not able to kind of stop this progression at this point, would be crisis. And again, very subjective in terms of what this looks like for different people. So what someone might describe in this stage of things are breaking down, we want to emphasize safety, right? Keeping both yourself and other folks safe. So this is a really great plan to have time to have a conversation about, do folks have a safety plan? Or what are their additional supports if things are really difficult for them? And what's the difference between things are really difficult and they might cross over into that line where they don't feel like they can handle it and they are overwhelmed, and that might be identified as a crisis. And sometimes, despite all of the tools that they have access to or support, folks might find themselves in a crisis and they might need for someone to step in and help take care of some things. And again, crisis is very much individualized. This doesn't necessarily mean that someone's calling a crisis line or that they're needing any kind of inpatient mental health stay. This might mean that they need to take a sick day, right, from work, a mental health day, to really provide some additional support and self-care and self-compassion. And again, we develop this entire plan when a person is in a space of wellness so that they're thinking clearly. Again, the idea is to be proactive instead of reactive, so folks feel equipped to handle whatever might come their direction. And we go through an entire crisis plan and carefully ask folks to consider things that might be helpful if they showed up in what they identify for themselves as a space of crisis. So we ask them to consider support. We ask them to consider medication if that's right for them, whether they need mental health support in the form of therapy or a community care or groups or support groups, other treatments that they might find helpful. We also ask them to think carefully about things that aren't helpful. Maybe they've tried in the past and haven't contributed to that space of wellness and balance. We ask them to carefully consider support in terms of what support they need and the people that might be able to provide that. RAP asks folks to consider identifying a minimum of 5 supporters. And those can be formal supports if they don't have individuals in their network that can provide support. And we ask them to consider a lot of different things when they're thinking about support, because we want them to be set up for success and we want them to set their supporter up for success, right? It creates an opportunity for a dialogue with the individual about whether they're willing and able to provide that support. But really, I can have a conversation with this person that I've identified and said, this would be helpful if you see this. So I'm empowering them to support me by being specific about what works and about what they can identify. So they'll know what they're looking for and when they can step in. So I'm also giving them permission, and that really empowers them to feel like they can support me in a way that's meaningful and helpful. We want to identify enough folks so that it doesn't matter what time of day or where I might be. If I'm in need of support, I have options, so that if some folks are either geographically or just not available, they might be at work or in a meeting or whatever, that we have more than one option to go to. We also encourage folks to have some additional resources like the crisis line or the text line or some support groups, so that if individuals aren't available, they have an option that's kind of available all the time for them to be able to check into. And then we talk about what does that look like when we start to come out of crisis, right? Just as important as having support during that time is what kind of support and how much is helpful as you start to ease back into taking control over those things that maybe people lessened the load a little bit, took a few things off your plate. And we caution folks against jumping right back in and putting all of those things on their plate right away again, and potentially getting overwhelmed and experiencing a setback. So we intentionally think about that process of, after you've experienced this overwhelming period of crisis, whatever that might look like, however long that might be, how can you carefully plan for returning to that space of wellness? Often we're revisiting those things they identified in their daily maintenance. Typically, as folks come further out of balance, those things kind of get left by the wayside. They're not doing them anymore. So we talk about re-implementing those things, coming back to basics, then having conversations with supporters about, here's what you can look for so you can feel comfortable that I'm returning to a space of wellness again, my best me. And it's okay for you to let me have some of those things back. You can feel confident that you're not overwhelming me by giving me back that responsibility too soon. Identifying really what does it look like when I no longer need that level of help. We talk about gratitude, expressing thanks to the folks that have been there through that difficult time, and really letting them know that you appreciate that. Also taking a look at where there kind of breaks in relationships or tension in the relationships that maybe happened during that time of imbalance. Do we need to say we're sorry or make amends for any of those things? Sometimes there's damage control depending on what that crisis looked like. For some folks, there might be financial ramifications if they had to take time off of work, or if there were some spending issues or relationship issues. What do those look like, and what's the plan for kind of rebuilding that? And really coming back to a space of wellness. So there really is a wrap for everyone. There's a general one that was kind of the original, that's the red book here, that was intended for anyone who has a mental health or substance use or recovery experience, for them to be able to use that. They've then kind of specified or made some specialized editions for addiction, re-entry, folks that have been incarcerated and are coming back into society. There's a specific one for veterans. There's also a newer one for folks that are incarcerated to use while they're actually in the justice system. There's a wrap for trauma. So specifically focusing on that set of circumstances and identifying, again, what do folks have in terms of strengths and resources that they can utilize for that unique set of circumstances. There's a workbook that's compatible with any version of wrap that an individual might decide that they want to use depending on their set of circumstances. Wrap Plus is kind of a deep dive for folks that really want to take a lot more time and go to a deeper level in terms of resources or education or support, and really kind of flesh out some additional things. So it's not just their basic action plan. There are some kind of more intensive reading and resources that folks can consider as they look at their overall wellness. Again, it's kind of this whole health perspective that folks can consider in terms of really empowering themselves, equipping themselves to highly engage in their wellness and really want to take a much more active approach and go a lot more in depth than this basic wrap framework. And then there's an additional version. It's not wrap, but it's meant to be a supplement or can be used on its own, that was released last year in response to COVID-19. And it's a wellness guide and really asks folks to consider, maybe in ways that we haven't thought about before, connection. Specifically during this period of time when social isolation and social distancing and all these newer terms, which have become very much part of our day-to-day vocabulary now, how do folks handle that? What is a way that we can use this framework, wrap, to help folks who maybe don't identify as having a lived experience with the mental health recovery or substance use, or maybe might not find that model friendly? I'm a huge fan of wrap being a really great self-assessment that anyone can take. And this model of taking a look at what resources and tools you have in your toolbox to really help find balance can be applied personally, whether you have a recovery experience or not, and proactively can be used for teams or organizations, really taking a look at what strengths do we bring to the table and how do we respond to things that might happen. And this specifically is looking at connection and choosing connection and really kind of challenging some of the ways that we might have thought about connection historically. So when folks are experiencing isolation or loneliness, challenging them to ask some questions and really walk through this kind of intentional contemplative process of what is connection, what does that mean to me, and how can I really be proactive and take action on my own behalf to create positive changes, to move myself out of this space that I might find myself in that I'm not accustomed to, maybe I'm not comfortable with, or I'm struggling with all of these things, specifically folks that find themselves socially isolated and lacking a lot of the tools that they normally would have access to, in terms of going to the gym or meeting folks or being out and about, that really was limited, and still for a lot of folks to a large degree is very limited. So how do we walk through this process? There's 6 sections. What is connection, and exploring what does that look like? Enjoying alone time and really differentiating between being alone and isolating. What are connection tools that we might have access to, and how can we enhance that if we don't have a lot of them, and really take full advantage of what we might have at our disposal. The importance of structure and daily routine, and then support. Again, the idea that we're individuals who are designed for connection and relationship. So how do we identify the support that we have access to, and how do we take full advantage of that? How can we be that for other people as well? And really take a look at examples that we can share with others in terms of how do we get connected, stay connected, intentionally continue to connect. And there's a printout of this that walks folks through. It's free. I've got it in the resources section of your slide deck. So you can download this workbook. Anyone can for free and walk through this whole process. So the first section of the wellness guide for isolation, really, again, that question, what is connection? And thinking about that in terms of the link that we have both internally to the different parts that make up who we are as human beings, and the external link that we have to the world outside of ourselves. So it can be with people, it can be with places and ideas, and again, it can also be with ourselves. And asking intentionally, starting with, what does connection mean to me? Oftentimes we think about that in terms of social relationships, right? And that's a huge component of that. But are there other ways that we can connect? And how do we take those steps towards connection and reconnection? I've spent a lot of time talking with veterans in terms of what are some things that you used to do, that you used to enjoy, that as life got busy and changed, that you found kind of fell by the wayside because you didn't have time. Now, in a surplus of time, you have an opportunity to reconnect with some of those things that brought you joy and fulfillment and meaning. Are there things that bring meaning and purpose to your life that you've always wanted to try but never found the time or the energy? Do you have space to be able to explore some of those now? How do we, and asking those questions are some of the first steps in terms of exploring connection. And then really exploring the ability to kind of think about, how do I enjoy potentially being alone? And one of the first questions we ask folks are, do you feel safe when you're alone? Because it's really hard to be comfortable if you don't feel safe, and really exploring what would you need to feel safe being by yourself, and really supporting and exploring that and kind of working through that process. And then helping folks feel comfortable connecting to feelings of isolation and loneliness. That avoidance is one avenue that we could take, but there's lots of other ways that we can process and lean into that to be able to move through that experience in a way that we can learn about ourselves and really create meaning, and view being alone as an opportunity to connect with ourselves and parts of ourselves that we've lost touch with or not had the ability to pay attention to, right? We have so much bandwidth or space in our concentration that as priorities happen or life happens, we kind of move away from some of those things. Is there an opportunity to reconnect? And then also framing time alone as an opportunity for self-discovery, learning new things about myself, meditation and mindfulness, opportunities for healing, past hurts or trauma that maybe I haven't taken time to deal with. And this would be an opportunity, if I wanted to take that, to go into some of those things. And then asking, what supports me to enjoy time alone? What supports me in feeling safe? What are the things that I need for that to be a valuable experience? And notice I said valuable and not necessarily comfortable, at least initially, because that's not something that a lot of people are comfortable with right now. We have a society that's very much instant gratification and go, go, go. We have so much coming at us in terms of information all the time that takes our attention that it can be uncomfortable to be alone or to sit in silence or to just be in space with yourself and know what that is and feel okay with that. So how do we process through that and validate that experience, that it's not initially comfortable? And what does it mean to connect with myself, and how can I move that into a meaningful and valuable experience to where it does become something that potentially is comfortable for me? And what tools then can I use or explore that enhance that experience? Discovering ways that support myself in connection, both with myself and other people, maybe connecting with things outside myself, like nature and the environment. Are there ways that I can do that? And how do I make this a choice, right? Really moving from that this is something that's imposed on us to I'm choosing this. Really, that reframe is very powerful in terms of my engaging my own wellness. There might be circumstances out of my control, but how I view this and the way I enter into this process is very much something I have control over. So I'm choosing connection, and I'm choosing ways that bring meaning and purpose into that connection. And noting again the distinction between there are some social connection tools, engagement in relationships with other, and there's healing in relationships, but also individual, intentional, mindful things that I can do on my own. In that context of connection, stressing the importance of daily routine and structure. So how can I plan for and start each day with an intention then to be connected, as connected to myself and self-discovery and others as I can be, and what is that connection going to look like and feel like for me today? So I'm starting my day in that frame of mind. And then it can be helpful to create a list so that regardless of what happens or circumstances that might change, I'm going to be flexible, but I can still be intentional and remain active in seeking connection. And then again, asking questions that might put me in that frame of mind. How can a routine help me in being connected? What is my routine if I don't have one? And what might be some things that I can start with? So that's kind of very similar to the what's my daily maintenance, right? Looking at ways to create structure. And it doesn't just have to be a daily routine, but that's one element of structure, right? And how can I create things that give me empowerment? I'm directing this structure, right? I'm choosing this structure. And how can I design it by choosing activities and supports and things to do that really engage me, help me to welcome change and uncertainty, to be okay in that space. We talk about healthy boundaries, empowering myself to really think about what works for me and what has me in this space of feeling connected and balanced, right? And again, really very empowering and self-directed, and asking questions. How do I create structure that's going to foster connection? What are the things I might want to do today? Again, language is really important. So instead of that I have to do to-do list that I might have, these are opportunities, things I might want to do, so that if I don't finish this whole list, I don't feel like I failed, right? These are options for me to engage, and options for activities that help bring and foster a feeling of connection. And then again, we don't want to leave out other people. This is not a process that happens in isolation. We're using this to combat isolation, right? So in terms of connecting with other people, what's helpful in those relationships? What are qualities of the people that I want to surround myself with that support my being connected, my being in a space of wellness? What does that look like? Let's be specific about who I want to surround myself with, and how they show up, and who I want to be when I'm showing up in relationship with other people, right? Who creates a healthy connection? Who helps me feel connected and valued and appreciated, right? What does that look like? And how can I intentionally build connections in my life so that I have a definition of not just who is helpful for me to be around, but who can I be, right? That creates those and creates opportunities for those healthy connections in my life. So connections going two ways, right? Who do I want to be in relationship with, but also who do I want to be in that relationship? And continuing to foster connections with myself and those pieces of myself. So personal development, personal growth, professional development, growth as whatever role I might be as a partner or a person as a member of a family or a member of my community. What do I want that to look like? How do I want to show up in the world? And creating a space too, again, self-compassion plays a role in this whole process of, this has been a really difficult year, right? Things have changed drastically in terms of how we interact with the world. We're doing this meeting via technology instead of in a shared space, right? We're not interacting face to face. We have a lot of tools that are really helpful in terms of forming connections, but recognizing that some of those come with a cost, like tech fatigue. So really being mindful of that and finding balance. And really understanding what are those things that really help me feel balanced and connected, and then being intentional about including them. So for myself personally, I really need to have meaningful connection with at least one person. It doesn't have to be a ton of people, but I'm very socially wired. So I need to have a meaningful conversation that's not about work or my patient load or whatever. All of those are great, and I thrive on those conversations too, but I need to have a meaningful connection every day. That's on my must-do list in my daily maintenance, right? And so in terms of connection, are you a person who needs a lot of more surface level interactions to feel connected? Do you need one or two more meaningful connections to really feel grounded? Do you need to be outside, right, and feel connected to the environment and nature, earth? What does that look like? What kind of fills your cup? And making those connections that fill your cup fuel you, a priority, working those in and having conversations with our clients about what is it that helps them feel connected and balanced, and how can we help them explore that, make that a priority, and really, we are made to connect with each other and with the world. So how do we honor that? And how do we create dialogue and a space that honors that? And this is just one way, this guide for connection, and then also taking a look at using RAP as another way to foster balance and wellness and healthy relationships that helps us to feel connected. And I have a list of resources where I got all of that information. And then I would be happy to take any questions or feedback.
So far, Sierra, I don't see any questions in the chat, but I am watching.
I am too. I was just going to say, I am here kind of watching the chat too.
And folks can feel free to unmute yourself or and turn your video on or leave it off if you have questions or responses about any of the content.
There is a comment in the chat box for you, Sierra, and it says, "This was an excellent presentation. Thank you."
Thank you. And we can also stop the recording part too if folks have questions and don't necessarily want that to be in the recorded portion.
Absolutely.
April?
Yep, I'll go ahead and stop the recording now.